Okay. All indigenous calendars, all of the most ancient indigenous calendars had something in common. All of them were 360 days. 360 days long. Well, the archaeologists, they understand that that is the vague solar year, is what they call it. And they have the opinion that these ancient people were so primitive that they couldn't figure out how long the year was. So they just approximated it into 360 days. Well, the Maya had a 360-day calendar. We're going to be talking a whole lot about it. They also knew exactly how long it took for the Earth to go around the sun. They had a calendar like this, the Haab calendar, which was a 365 and 1/4 day calendar. All these ancient civilizations had 360-day calendars. Maybe they were looking at something other than this motion of Earth around the sun. Maybe they were paying attention to something other than physical evidence. It's possible. We'll take a look. The Maya actually had two calendars at the very center of their civilization. One was called the Tzolk'in. I'm going to go to the bigger pen. One was called the Tzolk'in. Spelt like that. This means count, and this means day. So this whole thing means count of days. And the Tzolk'in calendar was 260 days long. Those of you who have studied something about the Mayan calendar are probably familiar with this one. This is the astrological calendar of the Maya, or the personal calendar of the Maya. Now, who knows about the astrology part of the calendar? Anybody out there? Oh, okay. One person. Oh, like the astrological thing, the aspects of the Mayan calendar. There is an astrological aspect to this particular calendar. There are 13 intentions on the part of creation. 13 intentions and 20 different aspects of creation that are represented in this calendar. 13 times 20 is 260. So there's a pattern. As a matter of fact, that's what this is right here. This is a tool that I invented and designed and had produced. And what this tool does is it will take the Gregorian calendar, month and day and the year, and transpose it to the Mayan calendar and show you what day it is on the Mayan calendar. Okay? Today happens to be 7 wisdom. 7 is one of the intentions. 7 means alignment with divine will or ethics. And the aspect of creation is wisdom today. So according to the Maya and this calendar, all of creation is resonating with the energies of divine will and wisdom. And that's the purpose of the day. That's the astrological aspect of this 260-day calendar. And by the way, all this information we'll have these in the back later, but all this information, I went to the Maya lands and met with the Maya shaman and had all of this verified by them. So there is the actual traditional information there. See, the Maya, this is a personal calendar. How personal can a calendar be? Well, in the Mayan civilization, your first name was the name of the day that you were born. The Maya had this idea that being as you were spiritual, you had a choice of which day you became physical. You actually had a choice. And why would you pick one day over any other day? Probably because you liked it best. Probably because it agreed with your intention for this life and what you planned to demonstrate as your aspect. So every single person born as a Maya came in knowing exactly why they were here. And everyone else in the society knew exactly why they were here. Wouldn't that have saved us a little bit of trouble? In fact, if you do some study, I did do some study of psychology, and if you do some study of inmates, both in prison and in mental institutions, what the whole problem usually boils right down to is that person was never acknowledged for what they came here for. In a lot of cases, they were blamed, or something was, the reason you're here is to make me miserable, that kind of thing. What they didn't get was acknowledged for why they chose to be here. The Mayan civilization ran very successfully for 5,000 years with this information, all the way up until the Catholic Church showed up and completely destroyed their civilization. The Maya are still there, by the way. There's over 8 million Maya who are living in Guatemala and the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. 8 million. They're not extinct. Not a lot of them follow their ancient traditions anymore, but some do. Then there's another calendar, another Mayan calendar. This calendar was celebrated every single day, every morning. There was celebrations. Yeah. Question.
Yeah.
Microphone, please.
You just made a statement.
I don't think so. Oh, there it goes.
You just made a statement about 5,000 years.
Yes.
What are you basing that on? What kind of statement is that? What is that?
The 5,000 years?
Yeah.
It was from the pre-classic, and then the classic period, and then the civilization crashed, and then went on into the post-classic period. So it was the blending of the Olmec and the Maya. Then we have the Tun calendar. The Tun. This calendar doesn't get talked about very much. Hasn't yet been talked about very much by the archaeologists. They talked about, when you hear about the archaeologists talk about the Mayan calendar, they usually, or the Aztec calendar, they're actually talking about this Haab calendar. It's the one that they understood. This calendar was used for one purpose and one purpose only: taxes. It was the bookkeeping calendar of the Maya. They were an agrarian society, and when could they pay their taxes? When the crops came in. So this calendar was used by the city-states for administration purposes. These two calendars, this was celebrated every day by every person, and this calendar was known as the divine divine or prophetic calendar of the Maya. Have you heard about the Mayan prophecies and how phenomenally accurate they are and have been? This calendar, this tune calendar, is where those prophecies were generated. It is a 360-day calendar. We'll be talking mostly about this calendar. I'm going to show you a graphic of how these two work together. This is the 260-day calendar. And here, see if I can do this. Not bad. This is the Tzolk'in, that's the tune, and each day on this calendar was like a tooth on a gear, like that. And there's 260 of them. And then over here, there's 360 days on that calendar. As this calendar turns in this direction, like that, it in turn revolves this calendar in large cycles. This one just goes around and around and around, and this one goes around in 360-day increments. Every 52 revolutions of this calendar, these two teeth match back up. It was a very special time in the Mayan civilization. To show you how seriously they took all of this, every 52 tune, they would have a celebration, a big celebration, wherein the night before, they would put out every fire and every spark in their whole entire civilization. Every bit of fire was extinguished and was relit at the temples the next morning, and then distributed by the priests to the people and by runners to the villages. And they spread fire throughout their whole civilization once again. All debts were absolved, and they started all over. That's a big commitment, don't you think? Can you imagine purposefully blacking out all the electricity throughout our entire civilization? I mean all the batteries too. No embers. Completely turning off all the electricity because of an event on your calendar. Can you imagine that? Not our civilization. We're looking at something completely differently, aren't we?
When they put out every single fire, was it a 24-hour period that they went from? Like, how long a period was it that you said, like, from, was it dawn to dusk or what?
Yeah, it was put out at night and then started the next morning. All of them every fire was extinguished from like noon on. They put out all the fires, so that night there was no fire. Okay? By the way, an interesting point that I'll touch on it now. We may cover it a little bit more in depth later. The Maya divided each day into 13 hours, not 24 hours. 13 hours. And then they divided those 13 hours, notice 13 intentions. Then they divided the 13 hours into what we would call minutes. Then they divided those 13 minutes into what we would call seconds. And then you divided those 13 seconds by 13, and that by 13, and that by 13, and that by 13, and 13, and 13, and 13, to where every single moment was individually divided by 13. Infinitely. That was their understanding. So, this was very, very central to the Mayans' understanding. Note, there are no planets or moons or anything going around our sun every 260 days. There are no planets or moons or any objects going around every 360 days either. Although I guess it's a coincidence that every planet and every galaxy throughout the whole universe, all of them spin in 360 degrees. Our calendar only has to do with our speck of mud going around this little speck of light we call the sun in a sea of 100 billion stars in this one galaxy out of 100 billion galaxies in the universe. So how big is our calendar? Our calendar is completely insignificant. On the other hand, these guys were looking at something a lot bigger.